All right, Mr. Chairman, you are live.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Corporations Committee. We do have only 4 bills before us today. We will not be hearing 199 anti-stacking. Apparently, there are some people that really want to testify who couldn't make it down to Cheyenne on short notice. So only 4 before us, and hopefully a couple go fairly quick. We're going to start today on House Bill 79 subdivisions, primarily because the sponsor is a member of the committee and she's promised to do a short and efficient hearing. So before we start, we probably should call the roll, right, Barb? So if you'd call the roll and then everybody get ready to do House Bill 79 first.
Okay, Representative Blackburn, Representative Clausen, Representative Clifford, Representative Duncan, Vice Chairman Ayer, Representative Hunt, Representative McGuire, Representative Roscoe, Chairman Zwaniter. Thank you.
We apparently have a quorum and a full house. All right, first up committee, House Bill 79 subdivisions, brought to us from our own realtor legislator, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill clarifies the original intent of the Wyoming Statute 185303. That statute exempts certain division of land from the subdivision requirements imposed by counties, what has become known as the family exemption. In 2019, we changed the ownership and sales requirement from 1 and 5 to 5 and 10. By changing those requirements, we inadvertently encumbered several property owners being caught in the middle of a transaction and unable to divide or sell their property under the statute. The changes we're making today is simply grandfathering in those property owners affected. So please turn to page 2, lines 17 through 20. And then again, it starts on line 23 and continues over onto page 3, line 2. And this is where all we're doing is we're just adding in the date of February 27th, 2019. And that is it, Mr. Chairman.
And so Representative Duncan, that covers anyone who is caught by the time this bill becomes effective immediately. That February 27th date, was that when the bill was signed into law? The previous bill, tell me the February 27th why, and then I assume because it's been 3 years since we brought this, that 5-year window is being completely covered?
Mr. Chairman, the bill came into law that July. This just covers those. It's just a good window that covers those people who were actually inadvertently caught.
Okay, it just seems awkward in statute to put a specific date, not even a year, like an actual February 27th. And the significance of that date exactly is what?
No significance. It's a good date. It's the end of February.
I'm not sure the testimony is, we just picked a pretty good day. But it must be the day either the bill was made public
Yes.
or was through one body, or it became sent to the governor where everybody was on notice that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Further questions for Representative Duncan? I'm not seeing any at this time on the bill. Anyone else in the audience today want to testify on House Bill 79? I'm not seeing anyone online in the Zoom universe want to testify today on House Bill 79. Please raise your hand. Not seeing you there either. All right, with that committee, we will close public comment, and the bill has been moved by Representative Blackburn and seconded by Representative Hunt.
Question on the bill.
Seeing any discussion from the committee or amendments?
Question on the bill.
Not seeing any, and question being called. Barb, if you'd call the roll on House Bill 79.
Representative Blackburn,
Aye.
Representative Clausen, Representative Clifford, Representative Duncan, Vice Chairman Ayer,
Aye.
Representative Hunt, Representative McGuire, Representative Roscoe, Chairman Zwaniter.
Aye.
All in favor.
All right, unanimous vote. Representative Duncan, I assume you will carry this bill on the floor. All right, thank you. With that committee, I'm still going to await Representative Larson. I'll even text him right now to see if he's running behind. I know they had some appropriations things going on. So let's have our good Chairman of Transportation, who has brought to us today House Bill 119, Investigation of Auto Insurance Claims. Up next, welcome Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we go into the bill, I'll give you some background on House Bill 119 and that. And this was brought to me by a number of people in our auto repair industry. And what happens is people have a vehicle damaged. They notify their insurance company, and currently a lot of that is by either video or their cell phone. Take a picture of your damage and send it in. And the insurance companies from that are determining a value to the repairs and a cost. And they send the claimant a check. Say, here's your check. Now, some insurance companies have a statement on those checks that say cashing this constitutes your acceptance of this as full and final payment. They take it into a body shop and find that there was damage that did not show up on the photograph. For example, the front half of a rear fender of a truck is damaged. It needs replaced. But what the photo doesn't show is that the little stickers that go on there, the little decorative decals, and some of those actually cost more than what it does to paint the fender. So now the claimant or the body shop has to go back to the insurance company and say, hey, we don't have enough money. There's this other damage due to this accident and that I know of. No insurance company has ever ultimately refused to pay. However, I've literally been in a body shop and sat there with the owner while he waited for 2 hours on hold to get a commitment from the insurance company, from the adjuster, to go ahead and do the repairs. Some insurance companies, and I don't want to really get into individual names, are much better at paying for repairs and determining the damage than others. I would say my own personal insurance company was great the few times I've had to use my insurance policy. So that's kind of it in a real nutshell. Hopefully the bill would save time for people who have to take the vehicles in, get the repairs done quicker. It does not require the insurance companies themselves to do it. They can do the old thing in the old days, if you want to call it that, of go get 2 estimates and send them to us and we'll pay off of the estimates. It's that simple. With all the electronic filing of claims and that, a lot of people think if I take a photo, that's quick and easy. And it ends at what they find is sometimes the photo doesn't show enough damage to legitimately pay for all of it. And then now they have to go back and forth. So that's it in a nutshell. The bill itself is all on page 2. It's one sentence. And it says, for a benefits claim under a property or casualty insurance policy for damage to a motor vehicle, the insurer, that's the insurance company, or its agent, which could be any number of people. They even contract out claims adjusters. And I actually, many years ago, we won't get into the exact time, I worked for an insurance company and did some of this. But its agent designated to receive that claim shall not reject or accept and pay the claim until the full extent of damage to the motor vehicle is determined. And that's the full extent from the accident, whatever it might be. Now, like I said, I've had insurance companies that were great, but a number of people tell me that they're having problems. The body shops are having problems. I literally was cutting down firewood and dropped a tree on my truck, and my own insurance company paid for the repairs, which is embarrassing. But when you talk to people who cut a lot of firewood, you find out that's more common than most people think. However, not all companies are really making an effort to streamline the processes. It looks like they are by allowing electronic claims and photos, but in reality, I think it's delaying the whole process for the people. The insurance companies can take their time, but an individual might want to get their vehicle repaired and back on the road. I mean, any of us that have a major damage to our vehicle, we're stuck probably having to rent one in order to be here in Cheyenne. So that's it in a nutshell. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Representative Clausen, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhart. So is there a process now if you go and get 2 estimates and when the body shop tears into your car, they find something that was completely unknown when they gave the estimate. Is there a process for the insurance company to pay for those things, or is it SOL on that?
Representative Burkhardt, if you know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Clausen, I've gotten two estimates, turn them in. Insurance company says, either we'll pay the lower or the average. I've had both and yeah, they find other damage. And because the estimates are there, the body shops generally honor the estimate if they didn't make a really good effort to determine the damage. I think that answers the question if I understood it correctly. And they honor their estimates because it's a written estimate.
Okay, further questions, Representative Burkhardt? Would I be correct when we say the extent of the damage is determined, the actual determination would be by the repair shop who says, here's the actual bill of the damage. My fear is how we determine the exact date, the full extent of damage is determined because let's say they give you an estimate, they look at your vehicle and then, yeah, they're going through it and, oh, there's a couple more things. At what point is it when you pay is the full determination of the damage and you agreed that's the full extent?
Mr. Chairman, if I understand the question, if you get an estimate from a body shop, they're usually in writing. And the estimates I've gotten have said this is an estimate and they will in effect honor it. Even if they find additional damage, which puts the burden on them to really do a good inspection of it and determine that damage. Now, this does not require a body shop to do it. It says the insurance company, its agent, receive claims and they can designate anyone as their agent. They can get the claim from anywhere. And I had my original bill, Mr. Chairman, was a lot more complex than this. And we whittled it down to what was the minimum it would take to put this into statute. And this is what I came up with as a minimum. Let's fiddle with statute as little as possible.
Always appreciate that. Further questions, Representative Burkhardt? Chairman Burkhardt? Seeing none at this time. Which insurance company would like to go first? Ms. Wilkinson. Welcome to Corporations.
There we go. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, technical difficulties. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Catherine Wilkinson here representing American Property Casualty Insurance Association. Mr. Chairman, I have a few talking points on the bill from the insurance industry. As written, we are currently opposed to the bill. I will let you know that I have reached out to the good chairman and am attempting to find a middle solution, but let me give you our reasons as to why, as written, we are currently opposed to it. So this bill, it basically is saying that just drop off your car, and then if you have unknown damages, just look at it and then send me a bill. Excuse me. From the insurance side, we are concerned that this will delay the payment to the consumer and in fact actually make the claims process even longer the way it's written. So on the photo payments, they're usually paid out pretty quickly and they help folks get an idea of what the initial damage is. And so that they can get that initial payment out. And then when the body shops get into it and they find further damage, then they will additionally provide supplemental payments if there is something more that's in there. But a lot of times the photo estimating allows a customer to decide what they want to have repaired and be compensated for the visible damage rather than going in and fixing everything that doesn't need to be fixed. A lot of this legislation is going to take some of the negotiation away from the auto body shops and the insurance companies. And so it kind of removes that checks and balances of having both sides of the insurance adjuster protecting it and seeing what actually is covered under your policy. An unintended consequence from this bill, I do believe, would be finding coverage that wouldn't be paid actually under your policy because it might not have been something that was covered under there. And then it creates an additional out-of-pocket expense for the consumer because it wouldn't have been covered by the policy. I think, let's see. So supplements, some statistics that I was provided is there's about 25 to 50% of all initial estimates written by shops do require supplements. So it's not usually just the end of the story. And granted, there are bad actors in every industry, but I think that this is going to put additional consequences on the entire industry that's going to just hold up the claims process a little more. Let me see if I'm missing anything else in here, Mr. Chairman. The other thing that this may end up doing is increasing the time for rental vehicles. And many insurance policies also do have limits on the time frame for those rentals. So again, it could result in another out-of-pocket cost. I guess basically the main reason is that we do think that this will actually extend the time to payment to the customer, the insured, and that we don't think that legislation is needed. I'm willing to work with a good chairman to see if there is some way to more narrowly tailor this to the problem. But as written, it's just too broad and would have a major impact on the claims process for the industry as a whole. So that I would happy to be answer any questions. I may have to get back to you, but I will try. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkinson. So I guess I do have a question because I'm maybe a little more worried that it limits it instead of broadens it. So currently in the statute, it's 45 days from the receipt of the claim and supporting bills. The way the language reads is we're really just talking the extent of the damage to the motor vehicle. And so you mentioned rental cars or other supporting bills. All of that is not covered, even though it may take longer to get the full extent of the damage to the vehicle. There might be supporting costs that aren't covered. And so I guess, I mean, I followed you there until you said it might be too broad. And I'm thinking, well, this might be too limited. And if we added an amendment to the extent of the damage and supporting bills is determined, any thoughts on adding that language?
I may have to get back to you on that, Mr. Chairman. I don't know off the top of my head. And I hear what you're saying. I think maybe it's just for the initial payment. This would delay the initial payment. Then if you shall not reject or accept on line 6 to pay the claim until the full extent of the damage. Well, you're not going to know the full extent of the damage until you actually get it in the shop and dismantle it. So if no payment is there, then you're going to be waiting longer. I don't know if that answered your question, Mr. Chairman.
Pretty close, Ms. Wilkinson. And I will pull up the whole statute. I think that'll help answer my question, actually. Further questions? For you're representing who again today?
American Property Casualty Insurance Association.
Okay. APCI. Seeing no further questions at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Shaner. I'm always anticipatory if you might, disagree with Ms. Wilkinson.
Well, Mr. Chairman, today is not the day. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Mary Ann Shaner, and I represent State Farm Insurance. And I've also had a few discussions or just recently with the bringer of this bill, and certainly will work to see if there is a way to address the issue. Unfortunately, I think that you do have a few bad actors that cause some of these concerns. Initially, I would like to echo all of the comments that Ms. Wilkinson with American Property Casualty Insurers Association just stated. On behalf of State Farm, and I agree that this language is broad. When I passed this bill along to State Farm and the claims folks evaluated it, they honestly weren't even sure what this bill was intended to address. Because the language is that broad. And so I had indicated that I thought that it dealt with photo estimating and concerns with getting supplemental claims. And as written, we are concerned because it would basically put an insurer in violation of the law if they made an initial claim payment based on an initial estimate. And then later they found that a supplemental payment was needed that was discovered during the repair. So that's an interpretation of the language as proposed that we obviously think is very concerning. We think that there'll be a significant risk that will be placed on an insurer in settling and paying claims directly to an insured without basically tearing apart the entire vehicle because you won't know the full extent of the damage till you fully tear apart the vehicle. And so that would be significant in that we wouldn't be able to pay, initial payments on it until we knew the full extent of the damage. We think that the bill will reduce policyholder choice in the claim settlement process. For example, in Wyoming, you may have a vehicle that you've had for a long time and there's a dent on there and you submit it, you get the money, you decide that you maybe don't want to get that vehicle fixed because you're planning on driving it, for the next 10, 20 years. And so you keep the money. We think that this bill would limit that process. And we agree with APCIA that we think that this will ultimately result in likely delay in claim payments. So again, we appreciate the concerns, but we think that the language is just very broad and will have unintended consequences in the claims process. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
So I have a question. I'm just gonna have to do the quick background. My vehicle, I had a hail damage claim last summer and my insurance company at the time said, it's hail damage only. We're pretty certain there's no other damage to the vehicle outside of the cosmetic to your body. And I did the cool app they downloaded with a scan that did reverse imaging. And I was shocked that they actually could look at every little hail mark on all of my car. Ironically, after that was fixed, 2 months later, I got a vandalism claim on my car because something fell out of the sky and hit it. We assume no one still knows exactly, but and they said, yeah, you need to take that in. We can't just take a scan and tell you exactly everything going on. So my question is, when I submit a claim or anyone submits a claim, the insurance company gets to decide whether they can use, let's say, this cool imagery, or you need to take it to a body shop. The ultimate control, once that claim is submitted, to investigate the extent of damage is in the hands of the insurance company, correct?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, the ultimate control is, I'm not sure I'm completely following.
Quickly, if I submit a claim, the insurance company decides whether I could do a scan or a picture, or if I have to take it into a body shop. Is that true in all cases?
Mr. Chairman, I would have to get back to you on that. I would think it would be probably company to company, but I could get back with you on that.
Okay. Further questions?
I would say that I do think that that the bill is written would probably have a chilling effect on being able to use the picture situation because you wouldn't be able to be paying claims under a photo estimation until you knew the full extent of the damage.
But I could call my insurance company and they would say, we'll take it to 3 places. They would normally say, here's our preferred list of places we'd like you to take it. We have existing relationships, et cetera. But if you don't, you could take it to however many within 45 days of making that claim. You'd have to, under the current statute, submit that to your insurance company, and then they would decide which body shop to use or pay you a certain amount. I'm trying to decide what's in the owner of the vehicle's control and responsibility versus when I file a claim, how much control the insurance company has over how it gets fixed and how quickly and when ultimately the extent of damage is determined.
Yes,
Any
Mr.
more feedback you want to give me on that?
Mr. Chairman, and I could certainly get back to you on some of these, but my understanding is that with this bills drafted, I think that it would give less control to the consumer because of that you wouldn't be able to pay the damage until you knew what the full extent was.
Questions, committee? Not seeing it right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate it.
Mr. Hauk, welcome, Ken, to the Corporations Committee.
Well, I'm going to repeat a few things, but thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Appreciate the time. My name is Ken Hauk, and I'm the EVP for the Association of Wyoming Insurance Agents, commonly referred to as the independent agents. In the last committee hearing, I kind of gave you a background on a lot of that. I'm not speaking for insurance companies. I'm speaking for insurance agents, and They're the independent agents. So I'm actually in light of that, I'm speaking for their customers because no one knows their customer better than the agent. Make sure I don't turn that off. This bill is a very important discussion. According to the NAIC in 2017, 6.2% of all insured automobiles had a collision claim. 6.2. So it's an important discussion. However, WIA does not support this bill, and I'll go through that process. Some will be a little repetitious for you. So our thoughts on this bill is it may be well-intended, but it has an overall negative effect on claimants, people who own the cars. Almost every auto claim has an early estimate, human or electronically developed, to get the claim started, and then supplemental checks as needed once the body shop opens the damage. And sometimes the supplemental claim checks can be significantly large due to hidden damage. And that damage can be as simple as a $500 sensor in the bumper of your car that was supposed to warn you when you cross the center line. So that can be extremely expensive, and they may not know that even if they do a thorough estimate. So sometimes those hidden damages can cause a claim to go from a partial loss to actually a total loss because the parts are so expensive, especially some of the electronic ones. So our association sees three unintended consequences looking in this bill. The bill as written will eliminate the early flow of partial claim payments. That impacts the body shops receiving initial early payments, which slows down their parts ordering process, which results in more time out of service for the damaged vehicles. This bill as written will increase the rental car costs for all auto physical damage claims. If we can't get the ordering of the parts in for a month, if we can order them today, but we can't get them for a month, if we delay that first action by 15 or 20 days, now the rental car costs are going to go up. This could adversely affect smaller claims as well. If your damage is only $2,000, but one part we didn't even know was wrong with it. It's going to take months sometimes to do that. So it's going to significantly affect the rental car side of that equation. And this bill will, as written, will slow down the entire adjusting process, especially so in the more rural areas of Wyoming. Auto physical damage adjusters are not traveling very often to small towns. They're just not doing that anymore. I would like it to be the way it was when I started selling insurance in the 1970s, when the adjuster walked in my office, says, I'm going to go over and adjust this one. I'm going to go adjust this one. I'm going to go adjust this one. We'll talk to the body shop. I'll come back and talk to you when I'm done. But that doesn't happen anymore. And it doesn't need to happen either. Wyoming has 2,500 licensed adjusters, pretty significant number, but only 203 live in Wyoming. And of that group, some of them don't do auto claims, period. They just do large property or liability. So if I venture to guess in Wyoming, based off of that 6.2%, about 30 to 35 collision claims of some type in the state of Wyoming, with a handful of live adjusters. So adjusting these claims is a very large task, and this bill will hinder the success of that. I will agree and I reiterate what the other testimony was, and that is some insurance companies are not as good as others. I know one insurance company, if you go on the website, the most significant thing on their website is we changed our logo this year, we changed our logo this year, we changed our logo this year. I'm pretty sure their checks say if you cash this check, it's a full settlement. That's the problem you probably should fix. Don't let them do that. If you cash this check, it's full settlement. You can fix that part of it pretty easy. We all would like consumer choice, no question about it. A photo app or an in-person adjuster, but it's just not practical, especially in the wide expanses of Wyoming. This bill will actually eliminate the photo app as a tool to speed up claims process. I can speak of that as an agent where I had my clients had claims. I can speak to it as me having a claim. I can speak to it when my son's car was run into by a drunken driver and he had a bad insurance company and I had a long fight. I won the battle, but I lost the war on that one. But the photo app process is fast, it's inexpensive, and it's continually getting better. There's nothing wrong with technology here. A well-trained adjuster sitting at a desk can estimate damages because they have a massive amount of claims data resources built into their systems. They don't make a lot of decisions. They punch things in the computer, and the computer tells them this is what's going to be broken in there. That's how they get those first checks out. In closing, without question, the concept of partial payments to get repair process started is the industry norm. That's what happens every day. Those 30,000, 35,000 claims are getting a check early. This bill as written will eliminate early estimate partial payments completely. Because it says you can't do it until you've got the full claim. One side thing I hadn't thought about before, if they send a check and say, you're going to settle it, you're going to use, this is the full settlement, and then they find that $500 sensor inside that is damaged, you've taken your settlement too soon. So that will create a problem as well. Without question, the photo app technology speeds up the claims process immensely. This bill as written will negate the technological advantages we have today completely. We recognize that adjusting auto claims can be problematic. It's stressful. It's imperfect. Nothing about it is perfect, but there are lots of tools available, especially on the electronic side. So this bill as written will have a negative effect on the claims process. Overall, there's not a positive effect here. And if you have some questions on that 45-day, I can answer those questions as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I stand for any questions.
Representative Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm kind of confused and I'm a little worried now
We did our
by
job.
your testimony. So I have a particular insurance company that doesn't have a physical brick and mortar anywhere, I don't think in the state of Wyoming, that I'm aware of, but because I'm a military family member, I get a great benefit from having this insurance company. And I exclusively do things via the app. So as you said, the app would be taken away. So am I by having this bill, am I being limited by my insurance benefits then? Because I won't be able to participate with certain insurances because I wouldn't be able to have my app any longer?
Mr. Howe, go ahead.
Representative Duncan, I would agree with that in general concept. Yes, I do believe this bill will eliminate the usefulness of the photo app for starting a claim. The photo app doesn't end the claim; it starts the claim. And I would agree that probably would minimize the use of that app. And that's probably not the direction we want to go, especially in Wyoming, where we are miles away from live adjusters.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because my insurance company also allows me to use a different type of app, but this is similar, where if my house has damage, I'm able to do a similar situation with my house as well. And I know this bill doesn't address houses, but I would assume we're going in that direction to be able to utilize faster, simpler process for the consumer versus because when we have these massive hailstorms and things like that, we're spread thin. In my area of Goshen County, it's Hailstorm Alley. So I really appreciate being able to have an answer right away. So that really, do you see that this heads that direction as well?
Mr. Howe, if you'd like to opine.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, yes, I do. And I'll use my hail example. I had hail damage a couple of summers ago, and I knew how to jump the system. So I called straight to the insurance company. 2 days later, I had the adjuster in my yard adjusting the hail damage to my truck. And he wrote me a check. And he says, here are our approved preferred body shops. If you use them, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. But he says, if there's any additional damage, we'll write you another check.
So, Mr. Howe, I don't give the bill in front of you.
I do.
So on page 2 on line 6, if we just said shall not reject or accept and pay the full claim until the full extent of damage, because I do have concern about making someone wait to the very end to determine the full extent of damages and not allow them to have the initial payment. Would that allay all of your fears, or at least some of the fears, or that would allow the flexibility to pay an initial and then to be fully reimbursed if more damage was found?
Mr. Chairman, I would have to think about that a bit, because I think the two issues are the 45 days that it has to be accepted or rejected by the insurance company. That's who accepts or rejects it. And they can't get that job done in 45 days if the part that's the amendment to this, to that particular statute is in place. That just won't happen. It's almost impossible. So I really believe that the supplemental checks, and that is the norm. And there was some statistics out there that tell you how often that happens. And it probably happens more often than we actually think it does. The body shops are typically tasked with finding the little nuances of the claim. And sometimes there's not a great relationship between a body shop and an insurance company. One of them's trying to fix things and one of them's trying to keep the cost down. So sometimes that does happen. This is not going to change that at all. This will just slow the whole process down. Can that be changed and fixed? I think actually the statement of if you cash this check, that'll be full settlement of your claim. That's the part you can fix. Now, and I don't know of an insurance company that does that, but if there are insurance companies doing that is not right.
Further questions for Mr. Huck? Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you just in that last statement answered my question. My question was, how common is it that insurance companies send a check and say, if you accept this check, it constitutes full settlement? How often does that happen? Do you know of any that are doing that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ira, I don't have actual data on that. None of the insurance companies I've ever worked with would do that. But I'm sure there are some.
Further questions, agents? Not seeing it at this time. Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you.
Any other public comment in the room on this bill? Not seeing, let me check the internet. I know two of the individuals on are on animals. Anyone online wish to testify on House Bill 119? If so, please raise that hand. It does not appear so. All right. Any further testimony? Representative Burkhardt, anything you want to add before I close public comment? I do always enjoy giving sponsors a second bite at the apple.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd add, most of these issues come with the internet insurance companies. And in fact, some of the ones that advertise on TV, there was one that until I believe it was a year before last, was not even licensed to sell insurance in Wyoming. They didn't find out that they had to have that requirement until someone had that insurance and submitted a claim and that. If there aren't enough adjusters, my answer would be hire more. I mean, this is putting the burden on the body shop and the claimant rather than on the insurance company. And I've worked for insurance companies. They don't want to pay claims. We really don't want to, as people, submit them because that means we've suffered a damage of some sort, but they'll get out of whatever they can do to pay a claim and pay it as low as possible. That's one reason I don't work for one anymore. This keeps the customer on an even keel with the insurance company. I've had insurance companies tell me, go get it fixed and send us the bill. They didn't even want it for major damage. They didn't even want an estimate. They just said, go get it fixed, send us the bill. Never heard from them again. They were fine with it. So that, and the issue with the 45 days, that's already in statute. That doesn't change. If you read the statute, says shall be rejected or accepted and paid within 45 days. They already have to meet that requirement. This just says they have to do that. They have to determine the full extent of damage first. So under the current statute, they could say, well, okay, we're going to send you a check for $10 and figure it all out later. And right now, yes, all auto parts are taking a tremendous amount of time. I have warranty work on my own that needs done, not related to this or to damage. I've been waiting on parts for 3 months and I'm still waiting. So yeah, that's a problem with all the auto parts now. They just aren't available. There's a backlog on orders. So that's all I'd like to say, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your consideration and your time. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Representative Burkhardt. All right, we will close public comment. Nobody else jumped in the room. Committee, what's your pleasure on House Bill 119? Moved by McGuire. Is there a second? I'm never sure under the rules of procedure if I can second as a chairman. Seconded by Representative Clausen. Thank you. All right, committee, any discussion, amendments, questions on House Bill 119? I would say I think I got my answer previously, paying the claim until the full extent of the damage to the motor vehicle is determined. That would not prohibit if there is a rental car or subsequent bills to be paid. Those could still be paid. The more I've read this and thought about it, but you'd still wait till the ultimate extent of damage to the vehicle is determined. And assumedly, once you know the extent of damage, you would know the extent of time to fix that damage concurrently, I would hope. I suppose some body shop could be like, oh yeah, you got all these problems, but it might be 3 months, it might be 6 months right now to get parts in. So maybe that might not be true, but it is interesting because sometimes, we all appreciate clear, crisp, not clunky statutes. And then people say, well, we need to expand it. And I at least appreciate, Representative Burkhart, that you brought a one paragraph that's pretty broad that would cover most things in my opinion. That's why my name's on it. Other discussion from the committee? No further discussion or amendments from anyone? Good sponsor. The next bill isn't coming for 9 more minutes, so I'm stalling. Representative Duncan.
I truly appreciate the bringer of the bill. However, I just really makes me nervous because I like my app. I like the process.
We are well aware.
Yeah, I like my phone and my apps don't take them away from me. I'll find a way to use them. So how many more minutes?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Blackman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Representative Duncan, have you had a problem with your apps or your phone with your insurance company? Have you? Thank you.
I thought I had an excellent auto insurance company that we did the scan and then we took it in and they had it preferred and it was knocked out and I was super happy until I tried to put my 16-year-old on my policy and it was $250 more than their competition and I sadly left my insurer. But I missed them a lot. So seeing no further discussion or amendments on the bill, Barb, if you'd call the roll on House Bill 119.
Representative Blackburn,
No.
Representative Clausen, Representative Clifford,
No.
Representative Duncan, Vice Chairman Ayer, Representative Hunt, Representative McGuire, Representative Roscoe.
Aye.
Chairman Zwanitzer. 3 ayes, 6 noes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it becomes an interim topic for the committee, we'll certainly invite you to the interim. And with that committee, speaking of perfectly on time, I mean like perfect entrance time, Representative Larson, we like literally perfect. If you needed, a minute to collect your thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, committee, our next bill for consideration will be House Bill. Give me a second.
96.
It's 96. It's a problem when I schedule 5 bills on the same day. House Bill 96 brought to us by Representative Larson. Welcome, Representative. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's good to be back in front of you again today. This bill actually came to the legislature last year. We set it aside towards the end at the request of the stakeholders and well, not at the request of stakeholders, but the leadership was just trying to figure out which bills were really critical to finish out the year last year and elected to let this one move forward in the constituency from around the state that had been interested in this. We brought it up again this year. And really what it does is it gives direction to animal shelters, those facilities around the state whose sole responsibility is to gather up domesticated animals, our pets, not livestock, and as we have them around the state, then how, if they're not able to put them out for adoption, if they're not able to place them somehow, and euthanization is required, how then does that take place? And historically, it's kind of really no different than how we've taken care of the human population. It's evolved, and we've become more humane as time has gone by. But historically, if you were euthanizing an animal in some of these facilities, they tried several things, from just putting the exhaust hose into a closed room and carbon monoxide doing. They also done some vacuum type procedures where it removed oxygen, and it was a very painful type of, well, if it would have been done on a human, would have been a very painful type thing. And so, as you know, I bring to light some of the more horrific things, but things have changed, but our statutes really haven't kept up to speed. And what this does is it will require them to have a euthanasia program, and to do it by intravenous injection and with an approved derivative of sodium pentobarbital. So the question that I asked last year, so has that taken place around the state? Most of our animal shelters have evolved and are doing this as a whole, but our statutes allow otherwise. There are a couple. One we're uncertain of has completely changed, meaning they shut the garage door and turn on the vehicle until, but yet that seems to be changing. This would require it. This would put it into statute. And so if I lived in Newcastle and had a ranch and had a dog and I need to put him down, does this require me to use this? No. If I lived in the Bridger Valley and had a pet cat that I needed, it was my personal one, I needed to put it down and felt that I wanted to do it, how it doesn't apply to you. If I were, like we have in my town in Lander, we have an animal shelter / veterinary clinic. So then does that veterinary clinic have to comply with this? He actually does it this way now, but it doesn't then govern his veterinary practice. Just governs animal shelters. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we go into the statutes. We go into the statutes and into Title VI on cruelty to animals and penalties, and we take out we scratch the language that tells that they can use carbon monoxide or gas chambers. These are the things that are cruelty, and then we go over to and put in a new G and talk about the animal control facility shall administer and how it should be done. And then we come into on page 4 that they even have to, we think it's appropriate for them to have a policy. I thought about that. I kind of stewed on that a little bit and wondered, how appropriate that was. But then as I looked back in my years in business, I had to have a safety policy. I had to have a drug control policy. I had to have things that my employees understood what was required of them to fulfill their obligation. And so in euthanization of these animals, we want, if there's employees of the animal control, so that we want to know that there's a policy put in place to help them understand how they administer the euthanasian, if I'm saying that right. And then probably most important to illustrate the type of facility is at the bottom of page 4 on T, where it says, as used in this section, animal control facility means a public or private facility for the primary purpose for which is to provide temporary care for stray, surrendered, or neglected household pets. And household pets does have a definition in this section of domesticated animals, not livestock, not. It probably would apply to, I would go there. So with that, Mr. Chairman, be happy to try to address any questions. We do have some folks here that are involved in animal care around the state, Ms. Marshner and others that may want to, that could probably assist in providing more detailed information.
All right. Before you on question for Representative Larson, before we turn it over to Representative Clausen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, so I've given thousands, if not 10,000s, probably hundreds of thousands in injections. And on page 3, line 19, I've never heard of intraperitoneal. What's that definition?
Intraperitoneal, I believe, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, Representative Larson, what's
Peritoneal.
intraperitoneal mean?
In the flesh, I believe, isn't it?
We're going to get an answer for that one.
So I'm used to sub-Q but I think we'll find out.
Let's Google it. It's you put a substance into a body cavity. It's intraperitoneal. Usually the abdominal cavity or the colon.
That's like if you have somebody that's got a heart attack and stuff. Finish them off.
Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Hunt, question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Larson, we're talking on page 3, line 12, sodium pentobarbital, or derivative exclusively. And and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a drug that has come up in discussion with the death penalty. But it has become a substance of some notoriety related to that. And so, some of the chemical companies that make it have stopped making it, and because they don't want to be affiliated with that discussion. And so I guess my point is that if there becomes a shortage of that substance, then where do they go from there?
So,
Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, so in my community where we have the veterinarian that also runs an animal shelter, I had him review that, and we had that discussion, and he thought that the derivative thereof he says there's the chemical structure is going to be a derivative thereof, that was not going to be a problematic, because I asked the same thing.
For the question, Representative Larson, Representative Clifford, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Larson, I'm in support of the bill, and I just had some questions. So a couple of, I think I heard in your testimony, probably a couple of people who use the gas chambers in this state, but is there any, so there may be a concern about if this legislation is passed, the transitioning from a gas chamber to what we're proposing here in this bill. Is there any assistance available for training or for staff and to properly how to perform an injection?
Is this an unfunded mandate, Representative Larson is bringing us?
Mr. Chairman, there's nothing in there to help them as they change. It's a requirement that and most of the facilities that are run by municipalities or privately. And if I were private and I didn't have facilities, I'd bring a veterinarian in and have him do it. It's not like we're changing from one fuel type to another that's going to require a lot of infrastructure change. if they're not your gas chamber, really all they're going to need to do is give the animal a shot. If they currently don't have people qualified or know how to give the shot, certified to give the shot, then they'll have to bring somebody in, which would be a veterinarian or such in the community. So I didn't see that as a necessary addition to the bill.
Any follow-up, Representative Clifford? Okay, Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Larson, is sodium pentobarbital expensive or hard to get at all? Is it difficult?
Representative Larson, can I bite on the street?
I must, Mr. Chairman and Senator Roscoe or Representative Roscoe, I have to confess a little, that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but that's why I took it to, I went to the folks in my community and said, look at this and see if you're seeing a problem. And the veterinarian that I went to said, well, this is how I do it now. And so by that, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but I think that if he would have seen that this was a difficult drug to get hold of, I'm confident that he would have expressed that. I also ran as you look at one of the co-sponsors being the good veterinarian who's our speaker, he reviewed it and likewise, I think he would have brought that. He's good at that. So I'm going to say no.
And due to the power of the internet, I have been told that there's free training statewide for euthanasia from right here in Cheyenne and some other places. So, all right, Representative Larson, question still, Representative Bear?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Thank you. Representative Larson, and I realize this is pretty minimal, but how important is the training and record keeping of that training? How important is that to the bill? Without that, do you think it's essential? I'm worried about this little bit of an unfunded Band-Aid.
Well, it's not really as much as it's going
to cost something to get some training.
It is. I think that's fair, Mr. Chairman and Representative Air. I think that is. We put that in. I believe we've even had some conversation about that on the necessity of that, and just thought that the importance of it was to clarify what the expectations are. Yeah, might be a better question for some of the public comment.
Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Larson, page 3, line 22, only if the animal is unconscious. I think that in general practice, I would think there would be some problematic things right there.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Clausen, I am so glad I went to the veterinarian before I'd done that, because he says what they'll do oft times is put the animal to sleep before they do the barbital.
Follow
up.
Yeah.
Follow up.
Mr. Chairman, so anytime you deal with livestock or pets or animals, unfortunate things happen sometimes that are out of all of our control, and there's sometimes euthanasia in a rapid manner is probably more humane than having to wait for a set of circumstances that fall under the consideration of law. Did you contemplate that when drafting this bill?
Representative Larson.
I think that's a fair observation. I think that I would suggest that at least as I contemplate the circumstances around that, as we have a facility probably which animals that have been abandoned or have been brought in that don't have a home are going to be taken care of. It's not going to be, it's not at your house. It's not. And so I guess I would certainly envision that you could have perhaps a stray that somebody saw get hit on the side of the road, and they bring it into the animal shelter, says, I don't know what to do. I seen this animal get hit, this dog get hit. It's howling. We know what happens. I think that, and if it's determined that they're going to have to be put down. What would the process be in that circumstance? But I think what this is I think that changes the circumstance, because I think what this is saying is in the process of an animal in the shelter knowingly going to have to be put down. But I'm not seeing a problem, but maybe I'm missing something here, Mr. Chairman.
We don't really. Okay, Representative Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's some confusion. There's a comma after unconscious and it says intracardiac injection.
Mhm.
All right, what questions for Representative Larson still? We're going to keep up there. Representative Clausen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, so my question wouldn't have been, or was pointed more for, and this comes from experience with livestock, but more something inside the facility that happened unfortunately, and someone that hadn't have training, it becomes more humane to euthanize an animal. That would be where the question would be carried.
I wouldn't really push back on the argument. I get that, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
Further questions, Representative Larson? Seeing none, thank you. Don't go too far. We might have some more for you here. Ms. Marshner, if you wouldn't mind coming up. I actually have some questions for you as well, but if you'd introduce yourself to the committee and any comments you have.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me today. I'm Janet Marshner. I live here in Cheyenne. I am the founder of Yola's Pet Rescue. I rescue primarily off of the Wind River Indian Reservation, but I also served about 25 years on the Cheyenne Animal Shelter Board. I'm not a veterinarian, but I will try to answer your questions just from the experience I have had in animal rescue. To clarify a couple of questions, there are some grant funds available for the facilities that take out the gas chambers. I think there's a $3,000 grant through the Humane Society to help with training and things like that. I also believe that animal shelters and rescues across the state are so well connected that we want to help everybody. You know, if this decision is made in training and things like that. It's common if you've had a household pet euthanized by your vet, I believe it would be the same drug. And I can't imagine that you haven't gone through this. It is a very humane way of euthanizing our own personal pets. Sure.
Mr. Chairman, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you on Zoom.
Well, it's a good thing I wasn't speaking, but I am now. So I have a question there on page 2 on the bill. When we talk about carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide is now going to be illegal. So I was under the impression having to put down a household pet, and I'm talking a rodent. We looked online and actually from the internet, it said the most humane way to kill or put down smaller rodents is to use a carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide method of do it yourself at home, baking soda and vinegar. That apparently under this law would not be allowed. Certainly would never do that to a dog or a cat, but household pets, as you all, people who've been doing this work for a long time in the law, that covers quite a bit of animals that would, hamsters, guinea pigs, smaller. Any thoughts on that? Do I need to take my hamster to the vet to be put down, or can I do it in a less humane way than I thought was the most humane way under this bill?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think so the law would not apply to you because it applies to animal shelters. Am I correct in that? Yeah.
That, Representative Larson, am I correct that subsection D on page 1 still only applies to animal shelters? Because I was under the impression. I will pull that up for sure while I'm looking at the statute.
Mr. Chairman, I'd read it the same way you do. That we're in cruelty to animals, penalties, limitation, and manner of destruction. And it talks about a person.
And Representative Larson, sorry to ask you a question. This bill was introduced, I believe, before we passed the reorganization of the statutes on animal cruelty. Does this conform with the new statutes on the bill that was passed through the legislature, the animal cruelty revision statutes, or this?
I think it does.
Okay. I'll pull that up as well. All right, other questions, Mr. Marshall, Representative Hunt? Other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you for being here, Janet. Other people wish to testify in favor of this bill on House Bill 96 here in the audience. Mr. Winnie, come on down.
May need you.
And I am going to allow somebody else in the room that we'll hear from after you, Mr. Winnie. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. As it turns out, I'm a flight instructor and I teach physics of flight, e.g. atmospheric oxygen content and how that affects a pilot. But more importantly, as a young midshipman, far longer ago than I would like to admit to, when I visited Pensacola as part of a trip in the to demonstrate aviation, they took us up in an altitude chamber. And a whole group, probably 15 or 20 midshipmen and so on, but they took the oxygen mask off of a couple of the midshipmen, and I was one of them. And what I felt at that altitude, and it was insufficient to sustain life, was it was like getting drunk very quickly. And they put the mask back on me, and so it wasn't a big deal. I didn't even have a hangover. Darn, but that's what I felt in what amounts to a pump down environment. I don't know whether that'll assist whatever you're deciding on here, but that was a personal experience. And it was, like I said, just like getting drunk. Subject to your questions. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Winnie? Not seeing at the time. Thank you very much, Bill. And pulling up the statute of Larson, I do believe it might just be a drafting error, but historically, that language in the statute does say no person shall destroy an animal from a decompression chamber or gasoline fired engine, and it applies uniformly to all cities and towns. They added the carbon dioxide, non-anesthetic inhalant into the broad definition of animal cruelty in this case. So you would no longer be allowed to put down a pet at home by these methods, which I probably don't believe is what you want, but we could certainly amend on the floor and fix. Other people wish to testify. We have one person online, last name Anderson. Let's ask them to unmute and bring them in. I believe it's Mahu. Welcome to Corporations.
Yes. Hi. Hello. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and the House Corporation Committee. My name is Madhu Anderson. I am a resident of Wyoming, and today I am here on behalf of Wyoming Against Gas Chamber Group. We support this bill HB 96, and there are three main reasons I want to address today, like why I personally believe this bill should pass. The first one is the gas chamber euthanasia is extremely cruel to animals, and the animals do not, the shelter animals like who are not adoptable do not deserve to die a painful, horrific, long death by these gas chambers. And especially the animals who are too young or old or have respiratory problems could suffer longer because the gas might take longer to get into their lungs, and it will take longer time for them to gain unconsciousness. I think there's another reason too, that the people who work in these facilities, like our shelter employees, they choose to work in these fields because they do have passion for animals and they do want to help these animals. And it's very emotionally and physically stressful for them to drag an aggressive or an unadoptable dog or cat out of the pen and taking them to the gas chamber room and placing them in the box, and then quickly walk away from the room because they don't, it's a very uncomfortable and emotionally disturbing feeling to see these animals trying to get out of the chamber and trying to claw on the walls of the chamber. So in my opinion, I think it's extremely, it's not fair to the shelter employees and definitely cruel to the animals. And the third point I want to bring it here is most people I have talked, I live in Rock Springs and have lived here for a while. Most people I talked around here, they hesitate to go and volunteer in these kind of facilities when they find out there are gas chambers being used or animals are being gassed. And then it does also affect our their donation money. So I believe that if these gas chambers are removed from every city shelter or private shelter from Wyoming, then people will be more encouraged to go and help these animals and volunteer in give their time and money to these facilities. And what I have found out that I have spoken to various shelters around Rock Springs where I live, who have recently, in fact, Rock Springs did remove the gas chamber just a couple of months ago from the local count here, and which is very, I really appreciate the help of Mayor Como and Tim Savage, the council member, and the city staff and the staff of the local animal control. They did remove this gas chamber and everybody was really happy. And it was a very positive feedback I got from people also regarding this. And what I found out is it is cheaper than using like sodium barbital. Sodium pentobarbital is the drug which is used as euthanasia drug. And it comes out to be, if we buy generic, it's way cheaper than using the gas chambers. And overall, very few states in America have left with these gas chambers. So most of the places do use EBI, that's injection euthanasia by injection. So we do support this bill, HB 96, and please do pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Ms. Anderson? I am not seeing it this time, but certainly appreciate you zooming in from Rock Springs today, where I believe was the last place in Wyoming that has a gas chamber in their shelter.
Yes, we do have, we had it, they removed it a couple of months ago, but we do have in Green River also, and in Evanston. Evanston is 100 miles from here, and Green River is like probably 12 miles from here. They do use gas chambers too.
Okay, further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Anderson. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up, committee, Ms. Chambers will be joining us. And Tina, the floor is yours as soon as you turn off that microphone. There you are. Welcome, except you're still on mute.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Hi. My name is Tina Chambers. I'm calling in from Rock Springs, Wyoming. I was born and raised here. I'm calling in to support this bill, HB 96, to ban the gas chambers here in Wyoming. They're just inhumane. The animals suffer and die a slow, painful death. And I also have, from my research, have read that they're also dangerous for the employees of the shelters. There have been cases where people have, well, I think at least one person has died by using a gas chamber trying to put the animals in. And so basically, I agree with everything Madhu had mentioned. I agree on everything she said. So just ditto on all of that. So just mostly just support this bill.
Questions, Ms. Chambers? Representative Hunt, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chambers, to clarify, someone has died in Wyoming utilizing a gas chamber, or was that elsewhere?
It was elsewhere. It was elsewhere. I believe it was maybe Kansas, or it was a different state than here.
Okay. For the questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Ms. Chambers.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Further public comment? Not Ms. Simons. Welcome to corporations. Come on down.
Gail Simmons. I am from Sheridan, and I'm for this. I just wanted to clarify, a comment was made about Rock Springs being the only one with a gas chamber, and I was informed that there's one in Evanston, one in Green River, and one in Gillette as well. The one in Rock Springs has been decommissioned. I stand for any questions.
Any questions, Ms. Simmons? Thank you much. All right, committee, not seeing any further public comment online or in person. Any last thoughts before I close public comment, Representative Larson?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you on page 1 and over on page 2 on who can use this stuff. And I, if the bill moves forward, I'd like to, and I've been scrabbling here, but I would suggest maybe you and I work with LSO on maybe a second read amendment or even a committee of a whole amendment. In that what I'm trying to do is eliminate animal control shelters and persons in the first part, and then make it exclusive to animal control shelters in the second part of the language that's deleted, that somebody in their personal property may feel is an appropriate way of euthanizing.
I'm glad we agree on that. All right, seeing no further public comment, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Blackburn, seconded by Air. They're jumping all over you, Bill, today, Representative Larson. Committee, any discussion, questions, amendments, Representative Hunt?
Mr. Chairman, real quickly, and I'm sorry I didn't note this sooner, but on page 1 where we're striking line 14, gas chamber utilizing a gasoline engine, and I'm not trying to be funny, I'm serious. What the gasoline engine part is that? Do all gas chambers run on a gas engine? I mean, am I nitpicking this too much? But is it? It specifically says gasoline engine. So is there? Diesel, natural gas, etc.
Representative Duncan, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I heard this morning from one of my colleagues that's a vet. It's been known that some facilities or places actually use a garage with a vehicle. So that kind of a gasoline engine.
Representative Larson, go ahead.
Well, and I think it's a little bit of duplication. Of course, we all know that you park the gasoline engine in the garage, and the result is carbon monoxide. And so I think it was a duplication. That was existing language, and we strike out the gasoline engine because I've been kind of chewing on that bone a little bit myself. And so you accomplish the same thing by saying carbon monoxide.
So natural gas, gasoline, diesel, covered. Other amendments, Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, so I have a little concern with some of this language, and I'm working out, I think I've got a way to fix it or solve some of these problems. So page 3, lines 11 through the bottom of the page. Yeah, that would be. So my problem is we're descriptive enough to only allow one specific use of one specific method. And I think there are others that are humane. So my suggestion for an amendment, and I might not have the wordsmithing exactly right, but page 3, line 11, an animal control facility shall use approved veterinary practice. And then strike after shall the administer sodium to right up to 4 on line 13. So use approved veterinary practices for euthanasia of household pets. So because there's more than one humane method, and I think limiting to one humane method is problematic. Then going down, we can the hypodermic needle part. I don't think any of this is necessary. Once again, it prescribes an exact policy that I don't think is basically necessary if you use approved veterinary practice. I think there's more than one method. I think there's hundreds of methods that are probably humane, and limiting his shelter to just that particular method, I think is problematic.
Let me check if there's a second, first of all. Second, and then I'm going to restate the motion for you, Barb, how I'm hoping the good sponsor brings it. It would be on line 11. You would go through an animal control facility shall, And then you would insert used approved veterinary practices. Then you would delete the word administer, delete all of line 12, and delete the words exclusive method on line 13. Then you would additionally delete, starting on line 13, the word sodium and everything, the rest of the page. To read, an animal control facility shall use approved veterinary procedures for euthanasia of household pets.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And then all the language on page 4 would remain
I have another amendment for that, but yeah.
for now. Okay, so discussion on the amendment. Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So might I ask Representative Larson if he knows if there's hundreds of different ways that veterinarians euthanize animals?
Okay, Representative Larson, if you know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Blackburn. He, and I think the term, I don't think Representative Clausen literally meant hundreds, but certainly alternatives to sodium pentobarbital. However, under the context of an animal shelter, we want it done in the most humane method possible. And so another way that may be deemed humane to Representative Ayers to just shoot the animal versus and we're not, and so the animal shelter can say, well, the vet says just shoot them, and we are trying to make it prescriptive and say in the most humane way possible there. And frankly, I will admit, if it were, there are times that I think that is a humane way for disposing of animals, and guilty for doing so. But in an animal control shelter where you've got the public involved and where you've got everything there, we're saying we want it the most humane way possible. And so I would really,
Thank you, Representative Larson.
Thanks. Further discussion on the amendment? See, Representative Roscoe, you do? Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just think that this opens it up, kind of counter to what we're trying to do here, and it makes it too broad. So that's just my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Discussion. All right. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no.
No.
And let's see a show of hands. If you're in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. I have 3. Opposed, say no. Okay, that amendment has failed. Back on the bill. Further discussion or amendments committee. Representative Clausen, go ahead.
So on page, Mr. Chairman, on page 4, we'll leave lines 2 and 3. If an animal control facility euthanizes household pets, the animal control facility shall adopt a policy for euthanasia. Period. Strike the rest of the complies on line 5 and the rest of page or line 6. And then line 8, leave line 8, adopt a euthanasia training program. I think it's a little bit too onerous to require 2 persons or require each person to attend one time every 2 years and keep a record of training. I think these are people that actually care about animals. They're not people that are going to overdo it. I think if they have a policy, I think the record keeping portion of this is a little onerous. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there a second? Going once, seconded by Representative Hunt. So again, the amendment would say on line 5, adopt a policy for euthanasia and delete everything after line 5 all the way down through line 16. Is that, I have that right, Representative Clausen?
No, Mr. Chairman, I would leave the portion that says adopt a euthanasia training program and then just strike the requirements for when it has to happen in the record keeping.
Okay. Discussion on that amendment committee. Seeing no discussion, question been called. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. I have 4. All opposed to the amendment, raise your hand. That amendment's going to fail. Any other discussion or questions on the bill?
Question on the bill.
Seeing no further discussion or amendments and question being called, Barb, if you would call the roll on House Bill 96.
Representative Blackburn,
No, I, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm totally sorry.
Representative Clausen. Excuse me, was that no? Thank you. Representative Clifford.
Aye.
Representative Duncan. Vice Chairman Air. Representative Hunt. Representative McGuire. Representative Roscoe. Chairman Zwanitzer. 7 ayes, 2 noes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Committee Rep. Larson. You have those on the floor and we'll work on an amendment to just, excellent. No, we're just getting started today, Representative Blackburn. We have one more bill this afternoon to discuss. It's called Federal Congressional Elections Residency, brought to us from our very own Representative McGuire. And just as he makes his way down, Ms. Austin, there was an issue yesterday. If there's not a conflict on your own bill, I think you marked me as conflict on my own bill. So just so we're on the same page. Yeah. I got it. I wasn't really paying attention to Flores talking and all of a sudden they said, Zwanitzer conflict, that what? And I could not think of what I had a conflict on lately. And
You were feeling conflicted.
I'm always feeling conflicted around here. With that, House Bill 163, Federal Congressional Elections Residency. Please welcome Representative McGuire. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there is a handout that's being distributed right now. So there's a bit of a story that goes with this, and then the bill makes more sense after you hear the story. So it's been an ongoing issue, not only in Wyoming, but all states of the nation, that we have people from outside of the state who run every year in our election cycle for our congressional and our US Senate seats. And the reason that it's important to us is here in Wyoming, where we only have 3 representatives, of course, 1 in Congress and 2 in the Senate. If you consider that there are 535 people in the US Congress and Senate, that means that our representation is 0.0056% of the total voting power in Washington, DC. We're not even 1%. So it's really important for us to have in-state people who understand the intricacies and the issues that we have here in the state of Wyoming. So for the US Congress and US Senate, the requirements for those positions is set forth in the United States Constitution. It's Article 1, and for the House, and it's Section 2 for the Senate. And there are 3 criteria that the founders of the Constitution wrote in. First of all, age. If you want to run for Congress, it's 25 years old. If you want to run for Senate, you must be at least 30 years of age. US citizenship. Again, if you want to run for the House, you have to at least have been a US citizen for 7 years. If you want to run for the Senate, you had to be a US citizen for at least 9 years. And then it says to be an inhabitant of the state when chosen. And right now we use the generic term residency. And that's the term that they use in the Supreme Court decisions. So while debating the framework of the US Constitution in Philadelphia all the way back in 1787 on that hot summer, the framers argued for the length of residency requirements. And they argued for 1 year, 3 years, 7 years. And ultimately, the framers could not come up with an agreement. And that's not unusual. That's why we have amendments to the United States Constitution. There are things that they could not agree with. And what they did is they left it up to the states to decide. So for over 150 years, the states set their own residency requirements for running for US Congress or US Senate. Typically, it was 1 to 5 years, and it varied from state to state. In 1964, there was an individual named Pierre Salinger, very interesting individual. He was a trained classical pianist and a very gregarious individual. And he was back in Washington, DC, and he was very popular. And a US Senate seat came up in the state of California. And so the powers that be wanted to appoint him to that seat. and have him put into the US Senate. At that time, he was not a resident of California. Well, he submitted his name. He was chosen through the application process, and it was challenged. And at that time, the California Supreme Court read the Constitution very carefully, and they said there's no length of residency put forward in the US Constitution, so you cannot dispute his selection based on the length of residency. And then the US Senate, which has to approve appointments, they said, well, we're following the Supreme Court of California. They said the same thing. So Pierre Salinger was appointed to the US Senate, thus earning his nickname. Some of us might remember him as Lucky Pierre Salinger, which he was referred to all the time in the US media. So after that decision, several other candidates around the country challenged the length of residency, and the United States Supreme Court, in a strict reading of the Constitution, said the term of inhabitancy, quote unquote, does not incorporate any measure of duration of time. And so that's where the problem is. Ever since the 1960s, people have been applying for and running for US Congress and Senate in other states, including the state of Wyoming. And I would also just add that in all of those decisions, there were very strong dissents by the judges. None of these were unanimous decisions. There were always dissents that said, obviously, the purpose, the framers of the Constitution, they wouldn't have put in inhabitancy if they meant that it could be, 0 seconds. They obviously, they had meant to put in some kind of a term. They couldn't come to an agreement, and they left it to the states. But where we are right now is that the US Constitution, or excuse me, the Supreme Court says that you cannot put in a length of residency. So what this bill does is it does not incorporate any other terms of, with regard to somebody to run. It doesn't include a length of residency or anything else. What it does do, if you go to page number 2, what it does do is it says that if you're going to run for either US Senate or US Congress in the state of Wyoming, at the time that you are seeking that nomination, you cannot be actively a resident of another state or receiving the benefit of residency of that other state. And so what that means is if you have someone who's homeless and they're hitchhiking across I-80, and when they get to Cheyenne, if they walk into the Secretary of State's office and say, I want to run for US Congress, great, here's the form. And it's the exact same form that all of us signed when we ran. And it says, fill out the form, you can do that. And as long as you're not the resident of any other state, more power to you, run for Congress or Senate or whatever. It's not restricting that. What it does do is it says if you live in California, if you have a home in California, if you have a California driver's license, if your kids are going to public school in California, if you're receiving the benefits of residency of another state, then you can't run for US Congress or US Senate in Wyoming. That's what it's doing. So we're taking it up to the edge. And the reason that the bill is a little bit longer than that is because the first portion that I talked about on page 2, that's where we are adding to the residency definitions, and there are definitions of a residency. And then on the subsequent pages, on page 4 and page 6, that is again the election form that we all signed, and it's going to add the language because all of us had to we had to agree or we had to attest that we've been a resident of the state of Wyoming, and it says since, so we all had to attest to our residency. What it does is it adds a paragraph at the bottom of that underneath where the governor has to have been a resident for 5 years. It adds to that and it says the language, as you can read on page 4, not at any time then knowingly seeking nomination or election to this office, received, claimed, or been currently claiming any residence or the benefits of residency from any other state. That's all it's doing. And on page 6, It's the same language except for an independent partisan candidate form. So it's the same form. It's just, it says independent, nonpartisan at the top. So that is the bill. It's it's aimed, it's not aimed at any individual. I've been, asked if it's, no, what it is it's just, it's non-residents who come to the state of Wyoming, and oftentimes they're not even here. And I'm sure everybody who's been around for a while remembers, we've had candidates who have filed and run, and they've never even been to the state of Wyoming. They don't even bother to come. They just see how things are going. If it looks like it's a closely contested race and maybe they could get some traction, they may come here and politic. And famously, we had somebody 2 years ago who came to an election forum and said, yeah, this is the first time I've ever been here. What a beautiful state. Gee whiz. And also I would just note for everybody, if you didn't see it in House Bill 148, one of the increases in filing fees is currently it costs $200 to file for US Congress or US Senate in the state of Wyoming. If HB 148 passes without any other changes, it would raise that fee to $750. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I stand for questions.
Questions, Representative Blackburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative McGuire, how many other states have something similar to this to keep people from doing what they do to us? Just come to the state.
I have not, Mr. Chairman, Representative Blackman, I have not found any other states that have similar language to this.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So other states allow people to come from Wyoming to California and just run?
Representative McGuire.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's a problem all over. Very famously, there was someone who had lived in the White House and ran for Senate in New York and was not a resident. I mean, it happens all over. And that's because of the Supreme Court decision, which basically says you can't put in a length of term of residency. And that's what everybody had before. And typically it was about 5 years. If you looked at all the states prior to that, it was usually about a 5-year length of residency.
Thank you, Representative.
Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to Representative Blackman's point, and this isn't necessarily a question for Representative McGuire, but anyway, there's an individual out there who's from San Diego, California, who has made somewhat of a name for himself, putting himself on the ballot in multiple states, including Wyoming. And I think he was one of the ones who was on the ballot. I can't remember if it was U.S. Senator or for the House this last time around, but that in that election cycle, they also included a gentleman from Philadelphia and somebody from Arizona, I want to say, but it happens. Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't you agree, Representative McGuire?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Representative McGuire? See Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative McGuire, where would this be decided? What courts would it be decided in if somebody was challenged?
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, it would go to the district court for Laramie County. Well, it may be the county of the individual where they supposedly reside. I don't know, but it would go first to district court. From there, it would go to the Wyoming Supreme Court. If the Wyoming Supreme Court upheld this statute and it was challenged further, and again, remember, whoever's doing this is going to have to want to pay to do that. So they're going to have to really think that they had a good chance of winning. And I'm just going to expand a little bit. So in the past, for example, when we had former Senator Enzi that was running for Senate, well, nobody'd run against him because, I mean, he was a lead cinch. He was going to get in. It's only, these people, they file, and they're from all over the country, and they file and they watch and, oh yeah, well, if there's a chance and they think I can come in and throw a bunch of money and maybe do something, then they will. But if it's, if it's somebody who's an incumbent and's been there and super popular, and they're not going to waste their time or money, especially for Wyoming.
Any more? All right, Representative Air, how are you? Question.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative McGuire, the Supreme Court has ruled that establishing a residency requirement in the state to run for office is not legal, not allowed. Do you think there'd be any challenge by doing the reverse thing that we're doing here by saying if you're a resident of another state, could that be challenged as well?
Representative McGuire. If
Thank
you
you, Mr.
understand the
Chairman.
question, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's why the language is very specific. It does not set a term of residency, because if you read the Supreme Court cases, they don't say you can't put in a residency requirement because the US Constitution says residency. They say you can't put in a term, and the ones that they have struck down specifically, the California had a 5-year term. And that was the one that they struck down specifically and said you can't keep Pierce Hellinger out because he hasn't lived here for 5 years. That was the specific one. So it was, and again, with this language, it's not adding any other requirements. It's not adding a requirement of residency or anything else. What it's saying is the opposite. It's saying you can't be the resident of California when you apply for Wyoming. And in my sheet, I say you can't have your cake and eat it too. That's what it's doing, is you can't live somewhere else and then say, but I'm also an inhabitant of Wyoming, because you're not.
Representative Blackburn. You got 9 minutes to get this bill through. Go ahead.
It's a done deal. Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, I hate to think that I would vote worried about a challenge. I can't see where this would be challenged. It may be, but I don't think we should vote or put things in the law because we're worried about them being challenged. Do you agree?
I would agree with that. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Just to make sure I completely understand, we're not saying you have to live in Wyoming, but what we're saying is you can't live anywhere else. Like it. And we have a lot of dual residents now. You just say you're same for hunting privileges, tuition benefits. Yeah. All right, further public any other questions for Representative McGuire? Not seeing any. Thanks. Mr. Winnie, come on down.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I just wanted to speak for a moment about active duty military people. You got 3 things you sometimes hear with regard to active duty military people that may refer or come up in this: residency, domicile, and home of record. Home of record serves a single purpose, which is where the federal government's obligated to ship you back to on the termination of your active duty. Only thing it does. So don't let that one confuse you. Residency is typically where you really live. And of course, you can live, if you're active duty military, in lots of other places than Wyoming. But you can then claim as your domicile, and this usually comes up for income tax purposes, but it could touch here, is the state where you vote and things like that. And in my active duty, because I wanted to make sure my old state couldn't come after me for income taxes, from the time in 1978 when I took Wyoming, I had a Wyoming driver's license. I voted out in Sublette County, and I had my cars titled and licensed in Wyoming. But the point being, a military guy who hadn't been in the state in a long time could still be a fully legitimate Wyoming resident for the purposes of this bill.
Mr. Winnie, can I stop you? It's my understanding if you are active duty military, you cannot run for a
Well,
federal
no, I
office.
don't mean while you're active duty, but when you leave active duty, you're correct. Well, I suppose if you look at the federal law, you could run while active duty, but you would be terminated on the day you took an oath if you were elected. But that's a fine point. I was thinking in terms of somebody who was leaving active duty and coming back to Wyoming. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Questions, Mr. Winnie? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Bill. County commissioners have a position on this bill. You're just here to hang out with us? Okay. I do appreciate all 3 of you. Mr. Schoen, elections director for the state of Wyoming. Thoughts on this bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kai Schoen, State Election Director in the Secretary of State's office. Our office has no position on this bill. However, this bill does modify the application for nomination as it relates to federal candidates. So there is a need to actually modify our candidate filing website, as well as components of our voter registration system that interface with candidate filing. And so it'd be a one-time cost of roughly $7,200. And with that, I have no further comments and would entertain any questions the committee might have.
Does anyone have any entertaining questions for the Secretary of State's office? Not seeing any, Mr. Schoen. Thank you for hanging out with us for a couple of hours. Ripping air is just tapping. No questions? All right, any other public comment? No one else online? Representative McGuire, last word?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to address the second or prior speakers' concerns with regard to residency, active military and also deployed military is definitely taken care of in 22-102, and this would in no way, shape, or form modify any of those, whether it be election or voting for those military individuals. So thank you.
Okay, we're going to close public comment on House Bill 163. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Blackburn, seconded by Roscoe, who really wants to. Committee, any amendments, discussion?
Question on the bill.
Seeing no further discussions or amendments, we will call the roll on House Bill 163. Go ahead, Barb.
Representative Blackburn.
Aye.
Representative Clausen. Representative Clifford. Representative Duncan. Vice Chair Air.
Aye.
Representative Hunt. Representative McGuire. Representative Roscoe.
Aye.
Chairman Swanett.
Aye. Slam dunk. Representative McGuire, you'll carry this on the floor. You have some good names on it. I imagine it will probably be heard. With that, committee, just so the public knows, we will be hearing all 4 bills regarding the state public health officer and associated issues with those titles on Monday from 12 to 2. I have tentatively booked this room and the auditorium because I don't have a good feeling about how many people may show up to testify. But if we do have a large amount, we'll just immediately move down the hall to the auditorium. I did also book the auditorium that evening in case the overflow of testimony requires us to go longer. But I would encourage you to look at all 4 of those bills. They're from Gray, Harshman, Larson, and Barlow to, see the differences and which you might pursue based on the comments we received from the public. Otherwise, session starts in 4 minutes. And Monday, I'm also committed the whole chair, and it's the first reading of the budget. So I may turn over the chairmanship during testimony and maintain myself.